I was kind of messing around yesterday evening, and this is really important thing to do, I think, as a creative person. All of us need to take the time just to play, to experiment with no preset agendas. Just work with the materials, with your hands, with whatever you like to work with, and just play and experiment and fiddle around, and maybe in the process you'll discover new things, at least for yourself, right? So one of the things that really inspires me are other artists, and one of the books I really have enjoyed is by Austin Kleon, who is a creative, a writer, an artist, and this is his one of his best-selling books here called Steal Like an Artist, and it's really a book about unlocking your creativity. And in that book, Austin talks about really the nature of all art is appropriation, inspiration from others. Even in the classic era of the Renaissance painters, a new journeyman painter would learn as an apprentice from a master. He would essentially be copying the master's technique, style, and work until he became skilled enough to start on his own. And so this idea in the modern era is kind of frowned upon because we have this legal concept of intellectual property. But all art is appropriation. All art is inspired by someone else. And that's important to realize. And getting back into the subject of typewriters and writing and words, one of the things I really love to do, and a lot of you do too, is to sit down with maybe a favorite book. I just happen to pull a book off my bookshelf, Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, A Savage Journey to the Heart of the American Dream, classic gonzo journalist writing there. But I like to take a book and maybe take the first sentence of the book, if it's notable, or another notable passage out of the book, and just type it. And what do you learn from that when you type someone else's work? Well, it's interesting because you're kind of recreating what they were doing physically with their fingers when they wrote the book, perhaps. And you kind of experience how their sentences work in the context of your typewriter on your desk. It's not that we're going to be stealing their words or writing in the same style of them, but there's something powerful and mysterious about writing the words that they wrote. So I started just experimenting with maybe typing up a few passages from Fear and Loathing. Also, one of the things I was doing last night in this atmosphere of kind of unrestricted exploratory play, creative play, is I started thinking about this roll of tracing paper that I've had for a long time. And I thought, you know what, I've never really tried typing on this tracing paper. And so I started playing around with that. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to just play around with some tracing paper and show you how we can use it for typing. And so stay tuned. Okay, so the very first thing that I thought about when I started handling this thin tracing paper is, okay, it is really thin. This paper might have problems feeding through the rollers of a typewriter. Some particular typewriters more than others. At the same time, I know back in the heyday of typewriters, airmail paper and other kinds of paper were very, very thin, and they were used with success. So I thought, well, okay, this might be interesting to try out. The other thing that concerned me is some of my machines have a hard platen, and they punch through the letters really hard, and so I thought maybe what I'd like to do is to use a backing paper. And one of the things I've been doing recently with some of my blog articles, especially when I'm typing on machines that have 12 character per inch elite font, in order to get the letters a little bit bigger for my blog, is I've been folding a regular sheet of paper in half lengthwise. And then I use this narrower column to type on. And so with the 12 character per inch letters, it becomes big enough to scan, post on my blog, which is 650 pixels wide. The letters become readable. One of the side benefits of doing this, though, is when you fold it in half, you have a backing sheet of paper already built onto that. And then, if you want to store this away, you can unfold it And this particular paper, this green engineering paper, already is hole punched, but you could hole punch your paper if you need to, put it in a binder, or you could then fold it the other way, protect the ink surface from being smeared, and then it has its own little protective sleeve. Well, I thought we'd do the same thing with this tracing paper, and so first of all, we're going to have to cut off a piece of this tracing paper. Okay, so you're going to need a hard straight edge and some kind of a razor knife. I'm using this Alpha touch knife. That is a pretty good, decent knife for cutting thin paper. You needed some kind of a surface to cut this paper on. I'm using a sheet of cardboard. It helps if you have a really sharp edge on your straight edge. Like for instance, this straight edge here has kind of a worn plastic edge, and it's not really well suited to cutting this thin paper. You're going to need something like a metal straight edge. Works a lot better. Okay, I'm going to lay out this paper on my cardboard, and I'm not going to measure it exactly. This particular straight edge has a thin strip of cork on the bottom, and I want to put that face up so the metal is right against the paper, so it will hold it and keep it from slipping. And just and this tracing paper is hard to cut without having some tears. It's just the nature of it. It's so thin. So make sure you use a really good straight edge. The next thing I want to do is the two sides of the roll. I want to fold those two together and try to get a good accurate fold on it. Increase the other side like that. Now these two here are the sides that were cut. So I'm going to take my good straight edge, slice off the excess here to try to approximate a 90-degree angle. Make sure you press down good on your straight edge so this paper doesn't tear underneath the straight edge. Like that. And there we have a little rectangle of paper that we have a double thickness of. The one side is open and the other side has the fold. Squeeze it between my fingertips so it's nice and sharply folded. And now we need a typewriter. So as I indicated earlier, one of my big concerns about typing on really thin tracing paper like this is that the feed rollers may not feed it properly, and it's such a thin paper it's possible the imprint is going to break through to the other side of the paper. My experiments last time involved this Skywriter, my Royal Quiet Deluxe, and the little French Roy typewriter, which has a really hard platen. I was really doubting whether or not that typewriter would work at all with this thin paper, but it apparently did. It actually worked pretty good. It fed the paper through nicely. So what I like to do here is to start with the folded side of the paper on the left side, so I know where my margin is, and I'm going to feed the paper in so I have maybe about a ½ inch or so margin, and it actually feeds relatively well. And straight, surprisingly straight. I only have to do a little bit of straightening here. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Well, it looks like it has a pretty good imprint there. I was actually pretty surprised at this little machine, especially having the smaller size font, the 12 characters per inch, but it seems to write pretty well. Let's pull the paper out and see what the imprint looks like on the back side. Okay, so right there you can see, maybe, that it's very thin paper, obviously. You're going to see the letters, the ink, through the back side of the paper. But the imprint on the paper, on the back side, you don't see too much of an impression punching through. So that's, of course, it depends on your individual machine, the condition of the platen, but it's not too bad, actually. And then if I go to the back side of the backing sheet, I don't really see much of an imprint at all. So I really like the color of this paper, and I certainly like the thinness of it, this tissue thin paper, because, you know, I could see for certain applications, maybe like writing poetry, writing a special note or a letter to somebody special in your life. It would be really sweet to have thin paper like this that you could put into a card and have a note. And especially with this blue ink against the yellowish background of the paper. That's a really good color combination, I think. I'm going to stick this back in here and do some more typing. So getting back to this whole thing of creativity, creative typing, playing with typewriters, and that's what this tracing paper thing is all about. It's play, right? But as I was writing this stream of consciousness little piece last night that started in red ink at the top, I, of course, made the usual typographical error. I misspelled the word suspicion. And so what I did, I caught myself, and what I did is in parentheses right after that misspelled word, I wrote the Latin word sic, S-I-C, which it implies this is the original way the word was written or spelled by the author. And since I'm the author of this work, and this is the original piece, then it means any misspelling I can justify simply by putting the sic in parentheses after the word. So I actually wrote about this. Back to the topic of typographic errors. If you can catch yourself before typing the following word, the follow-on word after the typographical error, just append the errant word with sic in parentheses. This gets to the point. The usage mode of typewriters over the last few decades has dramatically changed. These machines are no longer the workhorse of the professional office, the business world, or the academic world. So because the usage mode has changed more into, these are creative tools now for creative writers, artists, people that are just using typewriters privately and creatively, that the rules of engagement with typewriters are no longer the same. There are some people who will object vehemently to this idea that it's acceptable to have misspelled, mistyped words. But I would suggest to you that the primary use for typewriters as valid creative tools these days is first draft or stream of consciousness writing. So if yourself demands that you have to spell every word exactly, then you need to get some correction tape and a dictionary and work on your technique and not make any mistakes. But if you're simply trying to get words down on paper so you can edit them and transcribe them into a different medium, such as a word processor later on down the road in your writing process, then whether or not you misspelled a particular word may not matter. Now, if you're typing on typewriters to be consumed by other people, like, for instance, in blogs or on Facebook or whatever, Instagram, yeah, go ahead, and if you happen to make a mistake, maybe use that Latin word sic, just to justify the fact that this misspelled word, my little word suspicion, the misspelled word suspicion, that little word can be an artifact of the writing process. The actual process of me sitting here typing, my fingers made a mistake, I misspelled a word, that's part of the process. That's what actually happened. And it documents that word. It is there, misspelled on the page, but I can put sic behind it to say, well, this isn't really how it's supposed to be spelled. It's how I originally spelled it. So these are the kinds of things that you discover for yourself when you are playing around with typewriters. Creative, free, open-ended play. Here's another example. Last night on this very Skywriter, after I had written this little piece on the Royal Quiet Deluxe, I started thinking, if I were to pare down my collection of typewriters, what would it end up consisting of? Maybe this Skywriter and Adobe Rose, the Royal Quiet Deluxe, because those two are such nice machines, perhaps. But what about that Corona Standard from the 1930s? Okay, and the Underwood Portable from 1930? Oh, okay, just those 4. And what about the little Olympia SF? Okay, those 5. And I have to include at least one of my Hermes 3000s. Okay, those 6, just those 6. Yes, the rest of the machines in my collection are okay, but not exceptional. So here the list would be. This is the kind of stuff you write when you don't really know what you're going to write. And it surprises you. I didn't know I was going to start thinking about, if I had to pare down my typewriter collection, that's what it would consist of. But when you are in this open-ended stream of consciousness, free spirit, play mode with a typewriter, all kinds of magic can happen. And that's what I'd like to encourage you guys to do, is learn to steal like an artist. Take your favorite books, write from them. Sit down, find a passage you really like, and start typing them. Get some ideas going, and then maybe thread up some different kind of paper like this tracing paper and start working with it. Start typing, stream of consciousness, if you will. Okay, that's enough for today. Until next time, you guys, stay creative, have fun with your typewriters. They're tools of creative expression. And until next time, have yourselves a great day.